Hi, everybody. I'm David Butler.
I'm Emily Freeman.
Welcome to Don't Miss This. So glad y'all are here as we're cruising to the end of summer. It is getting to the end.
I know, we only have 2 more weeks left of our Summer of Heroes.
Yeah.
Or our Winter of Warriors.
Yeah, depending on where you are.
Well, no, we won't be in the Book of Mormon. I was going to say next year.
Next year when we do the Book of Mormon, we'll call it there were Winter Warriors in the Doctrine and Covenants, I feel like.
Okay, maybe.
Remember? There's snow.
We hope you've loved it. We've loved it. We just have this week and then one more week and then we did it.
Yeah. It was crazy when we started to think, this summer's long and the Book of Alma is long. But we will wrap up the Book of Alma next week. And do you ever feel like when you get to the Book of Helaman, you're done?
Yeah, you're done.
Yeah.
I always do. I'm like, this part goes so fast, always.
It
So
really
you guys
does.
buckle your seatbelts because from now until December is probably going to fly by.
Yeah, well, and it always does. But we have so much good stuff coming. So
much good stuff coming.
this is really where we start getting into the war chapters of the Book of Mormon. That's what people call them. That's what they're there. I never loved them.
Oh, really?
I
I
feel
always
like-
loved him. What does that mean about your personality and my personality, I wonder?
That you are a fighter. I am a lover.
That's not true. I'm so nice.
I am a lover and a fighter.
But I think it's because I love Moroni's mind. I really think that's why. I love
Because you're a strategy person.
Yeah, and
That
so I
is
just
why.
love watching him figure out all these things.
I
And
did.
Helaman.
Once I started to apply those chapters, once I started to think okay, why is this even in the Book of Mormon? What is the message that's here? Because for a long time I was like, why do you keep writing about this? Who cares? Which I think is against what most boys think. This is the spot. And I think most boys are
it's so weird you didn't love the more chapters.
I know, because Jenny has actually told me recently, can we please choose romantic comedies for movies? I don't want anyone dying in tonight's movie. So I do like war. It's just not in my scripture.
Okay, well.
Let's separate it.
And then meanwhile, it's all over here. In fact, we're going to talk about that in a minute, that it is all over. It just never stops. It's just constant in here, which becomes kind of the theme of what is happening.
Well, and
in this group.
And we'll probably bring this up, is sometimes you feel that way about just life.
Yeah.
Do you ever just get to the point where you're just stop? I want a break.
In 2020,
I don't want to keep...
you're talking to a group of people who know exactly what that
You're
feels
just
like.
I am so tired of fighting, and I'm so tired of thinking about this, and I'm so tired of, and so, I don't know, maybe you really do relate, but the way that I think we're going to talk about it today will make these chapters really come alive if you're like the old me. The new me really likes it, remember?
Should we let him look at the board before
We'll
start?
turn away, and you'll see on this study guide paper, if you have the study guide journal, that there's a lot of place in here for you to just write and think. So you have this notes and these notes, because there will be so many verses in here that will just speak to you. We're going to show you examples of things you can put in some of these boxes, but there's going to be a lot of personal application and lessons that will jump out to you in your particular circumstance.
It's fun to start out and just talk about what you're saying, that when it comes alive, and part of what makes chapters like this come alive is when you actually start looking for the application to, what does this have to do with me in my life? Several years ago, we had the opportunity to go to Cancun, and we went, any of you who have been there, you can go tour the ancient temples that are there. And when we were there and we started walking up, have you ever been there before?
Mm-mm.
It's so awesome. I'm going to try and describe it really good in case you have never been and you live in a place where you will never go. As you start walking in, you actually see these fortifications that are talked about in here. People really did use that, not just Book of Mormon people everywhere. It's how they set up this protection. And so you see these big banks of land that they've built up, and then rocks, and then the timbers standing up, and some of them are still there. That's how sturdy they are. That's how they could protect. And I can remember walking in one city in particular, one of these little ruined cities, the ruins, and you walked in, and as I walked through and I looked at that wall that raised up like that, and you could even see the places where the watchtowers were in each of the corners of that little city that was there. And all of a sudden it brought these words to life for me. I've read them enough times that all of a sudden I was I saw the things, and then I could see the visual, and I was like, wow, now I see the protection. I see what was happening and the work that went into the protection. And it immediately made me think, am I doing that for my home? Am I doing that for my area? Have I gone to that much work in order to protect this place for my family? Because it was a lot of work. And is it good enough work it would last through all of the generations? And
as you're saying that, I'm just thinking to myself, for me personally, I think the greatest enemy, like the greatest hindrance for me doing something like that for my own family, number one is just exhaustion. Like you read about it and you see all that they're doing and you're kind of like, oh. And I think the only way to get over exhaustion is to have a cause. Like you'll find it, we have a verse in here where Moroni inspires them what he calls a better cause.
Yeah.
Because if you don't feel like you're under attack, if you don't feel like there's a reason for it, like you could get burned out so quick.
Yeah.
Right? From
doing
this.
Well, and as I looked at it and as I had thought about that, we ended up coming home and just the timing was such that we had a stake conference. And my stake president had been thinking about those same chapters. And he talked about, I think when he taught us the lesson, and it's been a lot of years, I think he talked about 13 perimeters of defense that he found within these chapters, these war chapters in the Book of Mormon. And he went through and looked at each of the things that in our mind sounds like rocks and dirt and fence posts and things like that, and started talking about spiritually, what would that maybe look like in a home? How would you use what Moroni was doing to protect his people, to protect our people? And we loved the idea of that. And I wish I had taken really good notes in that state conference, but I didn't. And I probably should have just called President Lyman and said, can you remind me your 13 parameters of defense? But we kind of like the idea of you being able to get into the scriptures and into these chapters and be prayerful and let the Spirit talk to you about what are the perimeters of defense your home needs right now, because yours might look different than mine and mine might look different than yours. And there are perimeters of defense here for your family, and the Spirit could help you craft those according to the needs of your home, which is what we love about what we're doing now with this Come Follow Me program. And within this teaching that's taking place in the home is it becomes so individualized to your house and your home and your people and your life and your situation. And we want you to have the liberty to be able to do that.
Yeah, in fact, I think we have up on this paper 43 and 44 and 50 as good chapters to find that, but you're going to find it all through. In fact, one of the ones that maybe we can start with.
Yeah, let's do.
Because it kind of goes with what you were saying, and I put it up top because I moved that other one down to the bottom. But 49:11, this is after a couple of the battles had already happened. So we are like in the thick of it. And in 49:11, I thought it was so interesting that it says, right in the middle of the verse, it says, for Moroni had altered the management of affairs among the Nephites. And so they were disappointed. So the Lamanite army had come and they had fought, but then when they went back home and there was a time of rest, Moroni altered the affairs. And that's when he started digging up the heap piles and started doing things a little bit differently. And I think that's powerful, that we're just always asking the question, okay, what now? What can we do now? Right? And our things are going to change depending on our life circumstances.
And it's okay for them to, like, don't get to a place where you're like, well, I never have done it before and my kids are teenagers now and we didn't do it, so we missed that. But you love that right in the middle of the wars, Moroni decides to alter the management. And sometimes I'm like, well, me and Greg are the management.
Yeah.
So sometimes we really do need to be altered, right? We need that. Let's course correct right now. Let's think, this is the way we've been doing things, but do we need to shake things up? Do we need to do things differently? And you love that Moroni is giving you permission to say, yeah, shake things up.
Right.
Look at your circumstance and think, should we do things a little bit differently than we have been? That's such a good observation.
And with what you were saying there, I actually put this verse up there too because I was like, I don't know where to put it. But look down a couple verses also, exactly what you're saying, because he says this, that they actually come in 13 to this city the land of Noah because they think they can destroy it. And then it says in 14, but behold, to their astonishment, the city of Noah, which had hitherto been a weak place, had now by the means of Moroni become strong, even unto exceed the strength of the city of Ammonihah. So this one city that had been known for being this weak place, because they changed things up and changed the management of affairs or whatever that verse was, it is now a strong city. And so if you feel like, wait, my life right now, my faith right now, my home right now is a weak place, it's like, that's okay, because mid-battle or 3/4 of the way through the battle, that place can become astonishingly stronger than it was before.
Yeah, that's so good. I love when you just start right in 43. It just starts off right off the bat telling us, we get introduced to Moroni, which I love. I think it's important, we're going to come back and hit on this, but let's just start with this in 43:1. It tells us Alma could not rest when he saw everything that was going on. And I love the thought of that like things were getting so bad, there was so much contention, there was so much that was about to happen, that Alma just could not rest. And have you ever had those moments in your own home or your family or with a situation or a relationship or even at work, just anywhere where you're like, I can't rest because something is not right here. And you love that that's the build up to this protecting of a people, is that thought of, I just can't rest right now. And so
and definitely like a God-inspired restlessness, right? Because there are times when, remember when he goes back with Amulek and they take that time to rest?
Yeah.
So some people have the no rest personality, but like I really think this is like a divinely inspired, like, oh no, we're at a critical spot right now in your life.
Yep.
And a pushing almost.
And I love that the Book of Mormon is going to tell us right at the get-go, let me just show you the two themes you want to be watching for these chapters. Because in verse 8, it tells us, in 7 and 8, one of the things that was happening was this hatred and trying to bring people into subjection and stirring up people to anger and trying to take away their ability to do things, and he wanted to have great power over them and bring them into bondage. That's one thing that is happening. And at the same time, the design of the Nephites was to support their lands and their houses and their wives and their children, and to preserve them, to preserve their rights and their privileges and their liberties, so that they would be able to worship. And that's going to become the basis of the fight of these chapters as we move forward. And then we're going to meet Moroni for the first time in 17. And it's always so shocking to me because in my mind, I don't know why, I imagine him as like this 55-year-old, or 65-year-old, and he's seasoned and he's seen war and he's like...
Remember when you thought that about me for the longest time?
Yes,
you were
I
like,
do.
I thought you just think everybody
I think
in your
all
mind
wise people have to be 65. That is something that happens. Because he's 25 years old. Like, think of what he's about to accomplish at 25, and it just makes you think, you can't help it, at that young single adult generation in our church and their capacity for good. I mean, that's those people, you look out at that congregation of those young single adult kids, and you have to realize they have the potential of a Moroni, every single one of them. And how do we put them in a situation? You just love that Alma is like, let's use him,
Yeah.
Let's see what he can do for us.
Yeah, and especially he couldn't have had that much experience,
Yeah.
in doing this, in particular in this like magnitude of a battle that was going to be fought. And
Yeah.
that is such a cool thought.
Yeah, and at 25, he's the one preparing the people. He's the one fortifying the cities. He is the one who's passionate about this cause of Christ. And for those of you who are young single adults, this would be a really great group of chapters to just self-check and think to yourself, does this describe me? Is this me? And what would I need to change in order for this to be me? Because this is your capacity. This is your potential for greatness right here as you're looking at these chapters. So we just are going to pull out a few that we've listed right here, just so you can kind of see what you're looking for. In verse 19, he had prepared his people with breastplates and with arm shields. They were dressed with thick clothing. They had regular shields. Like he had gone through and thought, how can I best protect each individual person? I love the thought of that. And we could do the same in our homes, just as we're looking at the people who are in our circle of influence. What could we do to better protect each of those people?
Yeah, the next one is in verse 23 that we love, that Moroni knows that Alma is a prophet of God. And he actually sends people to him to inquire and ask, like, will you please ask him what his advice is and what his counsel is and what he knows? And then the counsel that comes, he employs it. He does it. It's neat that Moroni is seeking both channels of revelation here. Elder Oaks gave that talk once where he says we have our own personal line, but we also have another source of counsel and strength that can come in. It's neat that he is seeking for heaven's help in what he's trying to do.
We love that it talks about in verse 24 and then down through 26 that the Lamanite strategy was to come into the weaker part of the land. And so Moroni's strategy was to gather everybody together in order to strengthen the weaker parts. And we love the thought of that. True for us also. How are we gathering, and how does that gathering help to strengthen the weaker parts, and what does that really look like?
Yeah, 30 is so cool. Alma 43:30, where he just says, it's interesting that you get a little sneak into his thought process. Maybe because he thought, wait, is this a good idea? Should I be doing this? And he said, no, look, my only desire is to preserve the liberty of the people. So I thought it was no sin that I should defend them by stratagem. And it's just neat that the Lamanites had a strategy and how they were going to attack. So Moroni was just really deliberate in creating his own strategy for this. And I think that is so wise in all areas of our life. And why not spiritually? Yeah. To come up with some sort of
spiritual strategy.
Yeah. I remember once actually thinking about this with my own prayer life, where I was so good at my night prayers. And then in the morning, I was not a morning prayer. Because I cannot wake up, I am running like a bat out of heck. I'm just driving and grabbing breakfast as I go. That's just and I started to think about just my prayer strategy. I guess I was I love saying my prayers at night, but I was but probably a good strategy for me would be to begin my day, with that. That's just a better strategy. So I love that idea.
But now we're all dying to know, what did you do? Because I know your mornings still look like that.
Now I pray in the car.
Oh, me too.
That's
I love
my new
praying
strategy.
in the car in the morning.
Yeah. I love the idea of, and I wish I could remember where I just heard this somewhere. So sorry if you feel like I'm stealing your life. But somebody just said, they were talking about, a certain time period in their life. He was during that time period, most of my prayers had a steering wheel in my hand. And I love that concept of right now in my life, my best strategy to have a good prayer life is to pray, as I go. Yeah. And to study scriptures at night.
And we love that we learned from Zenas that you can do that.
All the
wherever
places.
Wherever you are, in all the places.
P.S.
So good.
My friend Ladine, who I work with, was just talking about these chapters the other day. And she just said, I just forgot that you could pray anywhere. And I just prayed out in my fields. Because they have land and fields. So I know, and when she said it, I was that's the most darling thing on earth.
Can we go borrow?
I want to borrow your field. I did that once in Rexburg. This is such a commercial, everybody. I was in Rexburg, and in front of their temple, they had this big hay field. And I was I feel like someone should... wheat. I meant wheat. And I was someone should pray in that wheat field. So I did.
Awesome. And I was with... a group this weekend. We were doing Come Follow Me study together, all of us, and we were studying those chapters. And I was talking about and you could pray in the field, and I looked over at Garrett, who's our football player, and he nodded his head yes, you can.
Yeah.
But, and I think he probably was does it really say field in the scripture? So those two, right?
Him.
Yeah. Whatever field you want, potatoes, hay,
baseball,
wheat, football. Fine. Okay, we got so sidetracked.
44.
Oh, I love this one. Okay, we're going to jump to a different chapter just so you can see things all the way through. So in 44, verse 3, there is this line that is so good. He says, and now you see that ye cannot destroy this our faith. Oh, don't you want to write that on a wall in your house?
With marker?
Yeah. A Sharpie. You cannot destroy this our faith. That is true about this home. And I love that he talks about that it's by their faith and by their religion and by our rites of worship and by our church and by our sacred support for our wives and our children. Like he just starts talking about, it's our faith that is allowing us to win these battles. And so just to remember to be faithful as you're going through each of these battles, whatever that looks like in your home.
And what verse was that? 44 what?
44:3, and then it goes through 4 and 5.
Yeah, because when you were saying, I think it's so neat to like look at all of those things that actually bring you, because I got stopped when you said our rites of worship. And rites are like ordinances or like our, you know, and I just started thinking about like, what a strength like a weekly sacrament is, and what a strength like temple worship used to be, and what you know, like, and will be again. You know what I mean? Like, there's something. I just like that he's mentioning. Oh, and our wives and our children provide strength at times, and our like. It's cool
so
to
good.
see
That's
all
in
of
verse
those
5. It's a really good verse.
Different things.
Okay, and you love the last one.
Oh yes,
so
because
I don't even know
here
where
I
you
am. Go do the 48 one first,
okay.
Because this one really exhausted me yesterday when I was reading it. If you go to 48:22,
I love that you're so tired today. You've used exhausted
really
3 times.
So,
you need a nap.
I might. And I didn't get one on Sunday. Okay. And it says this, 48:22. In fine, their wars never did cease. For the space, I don't know why that was funny. It's not, it was almost a cry laugh. For the space of many years with the Lamanites, notwithstanding their much reluctance. And it's just like, they just didn't stop. They did not stop coming. They did not stop attacking. And if there's one compliment we can give the devil, it's just that he is just a go-getter, right? Yeah. And he just, like, it's just like, they're just sometimes you just, your heart yearns for millennial rest. It yearns for Sabbath rest.
And it's so interesting putting those two together where it never did cease. And when we talked about Alma and having that feeling of, he just couldn't rest. There's something in these chapters about that.
Yeah.
That longing for, when is it going to end? Like, when is this part going to end?
Yeah. So I liked, and then a couple chapters later, you compare that 48:22 to Alma 50 verse 1, and it says, "And now came to pass, Moroni did not stop making preparations for war or to defend his people." And I just think there's something powerful about that. It's like, no, they didn't stop, and then neither did Moroni. Moroni didn't stop either. And I think that's cool that sometimes, how powerful to be in a faith community of some sort, where like they all benefited from the fact that Moroni didn't stop. And like there'll be times, I think that advice can go both ways. One, we can say to ourselves like, oh, don't stop, just keep going. But then sometimes it's nice that there's someone else in your faith community who is not stopping, who is still going, and can kind of inspire that in you, or
I love that
strengthen
so much.
you.
So these are just some of the ideas that you're going to see. And this, it's in 50 is where it's going to talk about, like, you love that when it did not stop. And I loved when you talked about this, that this is when he's going to start digging up the heaps of earth. And this is when he's going to start getting those timbers that were the height of a man. And he's making those ridges, and there's going to be pickets. And there's all of these things that are happening at the time when really he probably did want to rest. And that's the time when he had to, like, what you call that when you just like gear up, but you know there's so many good words for that where you just are like you're gonna go forward even still, where others might stop and faint.
Because where's that one verse? Oh yeah, here it is. But before you leave 50, because we're there, just look at 23 for a second, because that is the most wild verse in all the world, and it's so cool.
Oh, that is. I'm so glad you're going to point this out right now.
Because I just was scrolling, I was like, shoot.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that, especially if you start in 43 and read straight through to 50, like it's just war, battle, death, blood, blah, 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 like all the things. And then it's so crazy that in the middle of all that, verse 23, it says, "There never was a happier time among the people of Nephi since the days of Nephi," the original guy, "than in the days of Moroni at this time in the 21st year of the reign of the judges." It's so funny that like you would look at the 21st year of the reign of the judges and you would say like, that does not look like a happy time. But it's interesting that it's like, oh no, it was. Wouldn't it be funny if someone said that about 2020
I know, I was
someday?
just thinking that to myself. I was like, I'm so glad this says 21 and not 20. Because like, do you feel like that where you're like, no, this is not the happiest time? Except for as you were talking about it, my brain was thinking, I actually, as hard as this year has been, can look back at some really happy times. And that might be a fun just lesson to pull out in the middle of these perimeters of defense, just to talk about in the midst of everything that's going on. Where are the happy places?
Yes, yeah. What an awesome discussion to have with a group or family or just in your journal by yourself. But maybe we'll say, you were just talking about like what causes and moves people to do that. And actually, this will go right into what we're going to call the cause of the Christians. But let's go back to 43 for just a minute, because he's talking to Zarahemnah, who was his first enemy. So first Moroni battles against a man named Zarahemnah. And then there's a new leader, and his name is Amalickiah. He's going to come. But during that first struggle with Zarahemnah, they're talking with each other about kind of their motives. Chapter 43, I started listing, has words like intention, design, desire, like all throughout the chapter. And it's so interesting to look at what were people's purpose, what's going on in your heart. And there's a difference between the two of them in that. But I love this phrase in 43, 45, where it says, it talks about that the Lamanites came in and they fought like dragons in the verse before, because they were just like wanted power and control. But 45 is cool. It says, but the Nephites were inspired by a better cause. They were fighting for something different. And I think that is that step one? Is like, what is your cause? Yeah. What is your better cause that you're fighting for?
As a person, as a family, just within everywhere, what is that cause? Because sometimes it really is just sitting down to figure out what is our cause. And it doesn't have to be for the rest of your life, because otherwise that might feel overwhelming. But what's the cause from now until December? What's just your cause till the end of 2020? So interesting, because it is that cause. Moroni finds a way to figure out what that cause is for him. And he keeps simplifying it and simplifying it and simplifying it until we're going to find out at the very end. He's just has come down to this, 5 or 6 things that are, this is my cause. And everything is now going to come back to what this is. And I love the thought of that happening. It's interesting because we're going to meet 2 leaders right now. One is Amalickiah, and the other one is Moroni. And within these chapters, besides the perimeters of defense, you're going to watch the leadership style of 2 different leaders, which is so interesting to see what they do. And as we were looking, we were like, it's so interesting because you see it in people today. You can see which kind of leader someone is by just watching what they do.
And you can see who inspires them.
Yeah.
Because both of them are shadows of who's inspiring them.
Yeah.
This might be so...
And their cause.
Right. This might be so random, but I was thinking about Emma Smith this morning. I know that is random. Everyone's like, yeah, it was. And just, that song about her that, like, and some people will say, like, oh, I think she lost her faith at one time in her life. And then I was like, no, because at the end of her life, you saw how she sacrificed and took care of people. And I was like, those were like evidences of who was inspiring her, like the way that she lived. Good. And so I think you see that in in Amalickiah and in Moroni. You're like, who's like working on your heart? You can see it by the way that you act.
And we want you to take the time to go through. There's little stories that are happening in here. Like, you for sure want to teach the story of Amalickiah and Lahontai, which we are not going to go into great detail in that here. But that is something that you will want to do. And for fun, when you're doing that, I think that's in 47. Is that what you told me?
Yeah.
You might think it's really fun as a family to study Alma 47 and then go in the Old Testament and study also Nehemiah chapters 4 through 6. And the exact same story happens with a different outcome. That might be a really fun study that you would want to do.
And how fun, and the difference is going to be the cause.
Yes, the cause.
What is the cause?
That's exactly what the difference is for those 2 people, is what their cause was. Nehemiah knew his cause, and Amalickiah and Lahontai had a different. They just had a different direction they were going in, and their cause was different. At the end of this lesson, we're going to let you figure out your cause. at the bottom. So that's something you can be doing, and you might want to study those two lessons together before you jump into that cause. But we wanted to just go through and show you the difference between Amalickiah as a leader and Moroni as a leader. And maybe if we just turn to Alma 46. In verse 7, it tells us that the affairs of the people of Nephi were exceedingly precarious and dangerous. And just talks about where they were in their relationship with the Lord and where they were in their relationship with the Lamanites. And things are starting to get really unsettled. And in verse 9, it's this one line that is so good. It talks about, and we also see the great wickedness one very wicked man can cause to take place among the children of men. And as you're filling out your sheets, you might want to write that at the top right by Amalickiah, just that verse right there, 46:9, yep. And just list one very wicked man. And let's just show the opposite of that right now in 48. For how Moroni is...
Oh, the difference between them.
Yeah, the difference right off the bat in their leadership style, because we've got that one, the great wickedness, one very wicked man can cause to take place among the children of man, as opposed to...
48:17, which, by the way, Moroni is our hero for the week. And this is his power verse right here is 48:17. This is so good. It says, "Yea, verily, verily, truly, truly, I say unto you, if all men had been and were and ever would be like unto Moroni, behold, the very powers of hell would have been shaken forever. Yea, the devil never would have power over the hearts of the children of men."
Oh, it's so good.
In comparison, especially with one very wicked man who brought about this destruction. And I have just been thinking so much about this verse of, our challenge, by the way, for the week with our hero.
This is his favorite one. He's been waiting for this week since we started, everyone.
Listen, and...
He wanted to make T-shirts.
I did. Yeah, and the original idea for the bracelets, we're going to say Hell Shaker.
I said no, everyone. I did.
In behalf of all the grandmas, you're welcome. I'll have a bootleg version of the bracelets for anyone who wants a Hell Shaker one, but... The shake the very powers of hell, and it's interesting to think about, what would actually do that, and what was giving the devil power over people's lives. You see that in Amalickiah, and it was to take away their liberty, to take away their God, to take away their families. That is what was giving the devil power. So the opposite of that is what's going to shake the powers of hell. Is to lift other people up, to encourage other people, to strengthen faith in God, to strengthen family, to give choice for people to do those kind of things.
It's so interesting.
So neat that he's like
and
that.
And we're going to talk more about what is this going to look like. And we want you to be watching the differences. So at the first you see the power of one very wicked man. And on the other hand, you see a man who could actually shake the very powers of hell, of that wickedness. But at that same time, there was a man who had the capacity to do that, and we're gonna keep doing that. We're gonna keep letting you see that God had balanced that man who was gonna do everything he could to destroy with a man who was gonna do everything he could to save. That's what's gonna happen here. It tells us in 46:10. Amalickiah was a man of cunning device and flattering words. And he led away the hearts of many people to do wickedness. He wanted to destroy the church of God and to destroy the foundation of liberty. These are all the things that he was doing. And then you remember in verse 12.
And isn't it interesting? I was just thinking, because we were looking at Doctrine and Covenants yesterday about in section 29 where it talks about the devil was trying to destroy their agency. That is one of his purposes. I just kind of made that connection that he's trying to destroy their liberty.
That's what he wants to do. He wants to take away liberty and freedom. And sometimes people want to tell you when you are within religion, why do you want to be there? It takes away all your freedom. It takes away, you have no choice. You have all this stuff. I'll never forget sitting in a 12-step meeting one night. And the man who was leading that meeting saying that he had struggled with a drug addiction his entire life, and he started laying out what that had looked like. And then he talked about, then I found this place, and I come here for 1 hour every single day, every single week. And right when he said that, in my mind, I thought to myself how hard it had been for me to figure out that week 1 hour that I could go to one of those classes with a friend of mine. And I had to rearrange. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I can't imagine trying to like figure out an hour every day in order to get in to that class. And that was the thought that was going through my mind. And then the next words he said were, I have never been more free in my life. And I thought to myself, it's so interesting because you get to choose, your spirit gets to choose what is allowing freedom for you. And freedom from him was actually getting away from that place of bondage through religion and through allowing that to heal him and help him. So it's interesting, just those two things, because you've got the one that he's cunning and he's flattering and he wants to lead away and he wants to destroy and he wants to have bondage. That's one. And then Moroni, you see in 12, and you kind of talked about this already, but is a man who was talking about God and religion and freedom and peace and wives and children and praying. And he all of a sudden is going to come up with this thing where he's like, I have got a cause for us. And he tells us, we love this. This might be some of our favorite verses in the whole Book of Mormon. He tells us, well, it's actually at the very end of 13, that he wanted to create this band of Christians that were going to remain. And that's what he calls them. Several years ago, I had a woman who was not a Latter-day Saint say to me, I don't know why you think you're Christian. That's what, and she wasn't being rude. She was like, I want to know why you think you are a Christian. And these two verses came to mind right off the bat that I was like, let me describe to you what a Christian is. Because I said to her, well, what makes you a Christian? Like, how do you know you're a Christian and I'm not a Christian? And she said, oh, I can explain it to you really easy. It's this. If I live in Draper and I go to a church in Draper that is a Christian church, and then I move to somewhere else like Salt Lake, and I leave that church and I go to a different church with a different name and a different leader and a different group, but I'm still a Christian at that church. But if I left that and came to your church, I wouldn't be a Christian anymore. I would be what you call your church now. And I was like, well, that's so interesting. And like, I can see that point of view, but let me tell you what I think it means to be a Christian. And I thought of these verses, and this is what it says. Moroni wanted there to be a band of Christians that were going to be there. And then it says this, for thus were all the true believers of Christ, who belonged to the church of God, called by those who did not belong to the church. And those who did belong to the church were faithful. Yea, all those who were true believers in Christ took upon them gladly the name of Christ, or Christians, as they were called, because of their belief in Christ who should come. And as I was talking to my friend, I was like, for me, this is what it means to be a Christian. It means you are a true believer of Christ. You're faithful to that belief, and you're willing to take upon his name gladly, and you're going to watch for him to come. That is a Christian.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because in that regard, then both me and my friend were Christians. We both, that's how we lived our life, and it became such an inclusive thing, this band of Christians that you're like, who wants in? Right? Who wants to be part of this? And you love that that's kind of Moroni's call was that.
Yeah, and it's cool that like you see him gathering, lifting up this standard of, of Christ and pulling people in and all. I can't help but every time I hear like the cause of Christians, if you were to say, what's the cause of Christians? You're like, okay, just ask yourself, what is the cause of Christ? Like, what does he do? And he gathers and he ennobles and he exalts and he
lifts
sacrifices
and he strengthens and he
serves.
heals.
Yeah, it's just like that is the cause of Christians. When someone says, I have taken upon him his name, it means I've taken upon me his attributes and his desires and
his
what he seeks. And and so it's just so powerful to see the difference between the two of them.
Yeah, because
You
right
know?
from those verses, so we were in 46, 13, 14, 15. Right across from that, in verse 21, it tells us, at that same time, there was a group of people who were ashamed to take upon them the name of Christ. And so you see, again, you just see this conflict, on Amalekiah's side. That might be something you would write there, is they were ashamed to take upon them the name of Christ. But on Moroni's side, they were like, we want to be part of this band of Christians. That's who we want to be known as. And then there's one more thing that we love about these two men that we want you to look at, but you will find so many more. We're just going to point out one more. It's interesting because you remember the story of Lahontai and Amalekiah, and what happens is
that one from 47.
Yeah, in verse 47, and it starts out in verse 10, and it says. He goes to Lahontai and he wants him to come down to the foot of the mountain because he wants to speak to him. And he won't go down to the foot of the mountain. And it came to pass that he came the second time and said, just come down. And it tells us he would not. And then the third time, he went almost all the way there. And he said, you just come down this far. And it doesn't matter how many times I read this. Every time I get to this part, I'm always like, don't come down. Don't. Just stay up there. If you would just stay, you would be fine. But everybody, he comes down. And it's so interesting. We want you to write this on your paper right here.
Right,
on Amalekiah 47:10. That was his cause, was to bring people down. That's what he wanted them to do, to just come down from where they were. And maybe we all know people who are like that, they just want to bring us down. That tends to be their cause. And it is exhausting, right? No wonder we're so exhausted in all of these chapters, because it is a constant fight to try and bring them down from what they believe. And we want you to compare that to Alma 62. Is that where it is? Or is it 64?
62.
62 verse 4. Listen how neat this is. It's talking about Moroni. And it says in verse 4, and he did raise the standard in whatsoever place he did enter. It's talking about the standard of liberty, but I think it's true about just the conditions. Every time Moroni walked into a room, he raised the standard in that place. It didn't matter where he was. It didn't matter who he was with. You knew as soon as he walked in, he was going to raise up the people who were there. And isn't it so interesting to see that difference between Amalekiah, who wanted to bring people down, and Moroni, who was going to raise up the standard? And to think about, like for me, I want to think, which type of person am I in that? But second of all, to think, who are my associates and what do they do? Who are my friends? Who are the people I work with? Who are the people that I'm in contact with every day? And have I surrounded myself with people who want to raise up, and to reach that potential, which I think is so important and so good. And I love that Moroni simplified his, what he was doing so simply, in the fact that he was like, this is what it is going to be for me. It's going to be God, religion, freedom, peace, our wives, and our children. That's it. That's all that matters, is what is under our roof. And it was interesting because Garrett is just getting ready to go back into the season. Hopefully, we don't know what is going to happen, but that is the talk for the last 2 weeks at our home. And as he's been preparing and getting ready to go back into, that is a world really that does bring people down. That it's just hard. It's constantly hard. And everywhere you go, in every room you walk in, and in every conversation that you're in, it's just is a constant battle. And really what keeps Garrett grounded, and we've talked about it over and over this week, there is one thing that keeps him grounded, and it is taking the sacrament every week, and his wife and his babies, his 2 kids. That's it. As long as he can have that consistency in his life, then he's fine. He can go back into the battle every single day. And
it's cool that, like, I thought about this morning, that the phrase for his title of liberty is in memory of. Like, that's how it starts.
Yeah.
Almost like saying, like, don't forget you have God.
Yes.
And don't forget you have a wife.
Yes.
And don't
and
forget
if you can just go to those places. I love what he said at the very end. As we were talking, he said, she's my rock, and I know Natalie. Garrett's talking about Natalie.
Okay.
And he said, she's my rock, and I know she would go to battle with me. And I just love the thought about that, of gathering that type of people around you, that when you know you're going to have to enter in, because you wish you could say we didn't have to fight the battle, or like what you're talking about, it's so exhausting. You just want that rest that it talks about, but what if you can't? And I love that Moroni is like, then this is where your strength will come from. And he wrote it down. And maybe each of you will find a way to do that this week, where you just write it down and you say, this is our cause at the very bottom of your paper. This is our cause for our family right now. This is where we come for strength. These are the people we know will go into battle with us.
And these are the things that we will fight for other people, you know? That's what makes me think. Every time I read about Moroni racing the standard, I picture a cross. That's what I picture every time. Because I see him as such a Christ-like shadow and figure of one who laid down his life to defend and build everyone else.
Yeah.
You know, Amalickiah pushed other people down so that he could become king. And Jesus laid himself down. And that's why he became king. So that the rest of us could be, right? He was like, let's bring everybody along. And so that's what he was fighting for. Is like, I want you to have it, and I want you to have it. And I think that's what shakes hell.
Yeah.
Hell is founded on selfishness and on destruction and on bondage. And what shakes it is sacrifice and love and building others up.
So good. So many good things here. So we hope you love this one.
Yeah.
One more week next week, and then Helaman.
The book. I was like, he is next week too. Okay, we're out. Bye.